CPAC is ongoing, and now we've got Donald Trump and his big speech there. Now, bear in mind, CPAC is the huge gathering of the even more than usual extreme Republicans, and they're putting their values on display. It's about ideology and values, and lately that means it's about fake news.
We're not supposed to interrupt. You got to make your point. I just literally don't agree with that. It's not more than your usual Republicans. It is now.
I'd make the case that they've caught up.
Right.
But it was crazy.
Yes, it was. They have caught up.
They have caught up.
Flat-footed.
There's a guy named
Okay.
Sebastian Gorka in this administration.
That's true. Yes.
There's no catching
Maybe we
up.
can talk about him.
So.
Yes, that is a very good reason to interrupt. Don't ever do it again. And now here's the
Am I
president.
banned from the room?
Interrupt.
And I want you all to know that we are fighting the fake news. It's fake, phony, fake. I called the fake news the enemy of the people, and they are. They are the enemy of the people. They have no sources. They just make them up when there are none. They make up sources. So I'm not against the media. I'm not against the press. They shouldn't be allowed to use sources unless they use somebody's name. Let their name be put out there. Let their name be put out. Let them say it to my face. Let there be no more sources. They shouldn't use sources. They should put the name of the person. You will see stories dry up like you've never seen before. And I say, what network is it? And they'll say a certain, let's not even mention names, right? Shall we? The Clinton News Network is one. And we have to fight it, folks. They're very smart, they're very cunning, and they're very dishonest. They say that we can't criticize their dishonest coverage because of the First Amendment. You know, they always bring up the First Amendment. It gives you the right and me the right to criticize fake news and criticize it strongly.
We got to get a CPAC Stop Snitching t-shirt for him. That was all I could think of.
So, but by the way, understand that before he went on that rant, he said, I don't have a lot of notes. I haven't really prepared, but look how good I'm doing. Maybe you should add some notes. Also, we've been watching a lot of Trump. It takes a lot now for us to go, whoa.
Totally. Yeah, that's right.
And that, the First Amendment.
Yeah, wow.
Also, in his comments, he said, they're talking about these immigrants. It's so sad. He said that about the immigrants being barred.
He's a sociopath who doesn't have empathy. It
seems like he might be right.
It isn't surprising.
Such a fraud.
I mean, it's really, really clear.
No, it's great because now all the conservatives who care so much about the Constitution, they're always talking about the Constitution, right? Well, he just tread on you. He just said, he mocked your First Amendment, our First Amendment. He mocked it. And when a government official mocks the First Amendment and the Constitution, is that tyranny? You might want to look into that.
According to a Reddit thread that I read, that as long as chicks are ruining video games, the president can say what he needs to say save freedom. So maybe you should stop being such a friggin' social justice guy and grow up.
I hear you. And look, that's why if you were in the crowd and you were cheering when he said they have no sources, but they should name the sources they have, and you should use sources with names. And they should have no more sources, thereby contradicting himself in ways that are hard to fathom, but at least in 3 different ways. Did anybody in the audience go,
no?
Any chance this guy's a moron?
No.
I don't know. I'm just waiting. At some point, there are still a few, and it's, as always, this administration, when it crumbles, and it will, assuming that they don't rebuild public support through some horrible tragedy. But some Republicans are just going to have to step up, and
But they're not going to.
Well, some will. I don't know whether they'll be enough.
Mitch McConnell keeps coming out every day and saying, "I'm happy with this administration." I'm not thrilled with.
It's not going to be Mitch McConnell.
Yeah.
But that's Paul and Ryan and Mitch McConnell are happy with this situation.
I know.
Mostly. They can
So
push
Marco
the
Rubio's
legislative
second ball
agenda.
could drop at any moment, and then we got a fight on our hands.
Do you know? First of all, I'm reminded when Trump said the thing about the First Amendment when Hillary said, "Stop worrying about your guns and your precious Second Amendment." That was really.
I would have gotten enthusiastic to vote for it. She said that.
That's right. This is a guy who, for a better part of 3 decades, the 70s, 80s, and 90s, would regularly call the New York media that covered him regularly and pretend to be a guy named John Miller or John Barron. Trump impersonated a spokesman to give to act as an unconfirmed or an unnamed source to these news outlets. He did it himself.
Yeah.
And he did a great job.
Now, there's one other falsehood that he put forth. We can keep up the same, Master. Trump is going to have a lot to complain about in terms of the coverage of his speech at CPAC, but there's one area that he anticipated even before he was done speaking, and this is what he said.
By the way, you folks are in here. The place is packed. There are lines that go back 6 blocks, and I tell you that because you won't read about it, okay? But there are lines that go back 6 blocks. There is such love in this country for everything we stand for. You saw that on Election Day.
Well, it was really early, and so we might never know if we would have read about it, but we probably wouldn't have because it turns out it's a complete lie. Let's go to this graphic. You're going to see here some photos that have been tweeted out about the 6-block-long lines. Those are the entrances. I think I see a couple people. I think there's 2 or 3 people there. And then there you're seeing inside, no line to get into the actual room he's speaking in.
Also, I just want to point out that it's possible that before the president came, no one was allowed in, which would have caused an enormous spillover back in the street. I don't know. I'm just that's giving him huge
so much credit.
benefit. But by the way, he said, I mentioned the 6 blocks. Now I'm telling you now because you won't read about it. Edwin here in the studio just said, because you can't read.
That's why Trump won. Those sorts of comments.
I know. Edwin, come on, man. Not cool, Edwin.
Culture warrior over here.
Terrible.
And, he complains about the media all the time, but in reality, the media is, if anything, conservative. Really, it's more of a pro-establishment bias than a conservative or liberal one. But so why do I say that? CPAC gets so much coverage. Every year, it's CPAC.
Yeah.
And so you remember the liberal conference that's the equivalent.
No, you don't.
Netroots Nation.
Now, you don't, but in fact it exists. You could argue it's Netroots Nation, and there are actually many others as well. But none of them get almost any coverage. Netroots Nation will get a tiny, like Elizabeth Warren will go and they'll cover Elizabeth Warren's speech, barely mention Netroots Nation, but it won't be a big thing.
It won't be on the nightly news.
You know
And
what
it
else?
won't be over and over in every speech and who's coming and who's not coming.
That's exactly right. Not only do they cover it, they didn't even cover it to be like, hey, look at all the insane people at CPAC. Like, they didn't even cover it to expose, like, this is the base of the Republican Party. These are the policy advisors. These are the people who are like vaccine conspiracy theorists and think Muslims are crawling out of waterways and about to launch terrorists. They don't say yeah, there's another speech by Marco Rubio at CPAC.
And I remember I asked a mainstream journalist during Democracy Spring when there was a record number of people arrested for civil disobedience. It literally broke the record for most people arrested at the Capitol to get money out of politics. But it was orderly, it was nonviolent, and it was the left. So it was not covered almost at all by the mainstream media. And I asked them, now, if the Tea Party broke the record for most number of arrests during civil disobedience at the Capitol, would you have covered it?
Yeah.
And that person was like, yeah, no, you're right. We would have covered it wall to wall.
And basically the only thing that could get those sorts of protests around that time covered was Rosario Dawson at that one. Shailene Woodley showing up can get it to be covered. But until then, it doesn't matter if there's hundreds or even thousands of people.
The last James O'Keefe video that I saw, and I don't know, I saw it on Twitter. Maybe it was from a while ago, or maybe it was from last week.
That guy is also really stable.
Yeah, totally. They exposed a former CNN digital news managing editor for about a 30-second conversation that I saw where he said that the right just they don't make any sense on climate change. 97% of scientists, 98% of the scientific community. So yeah, I don't trust them on it. I don't believe them on it. And then he said, and also I guess you could say I'm biased, but when it comes to I think evolution should be taught in schools, and these guys want to teach creationism.
Yeah,
So,
that's called a bias for
shit.
facts.
That's right. I was like, I saw it. I was like, oh, this poor guy. And then I was like, no. How do we hire this guy?
Yeah.
If he's unemployed now, then the Young Turks should hire him. There's nothing zero wrong with what they uncovered.
By the way, yet another example, James O'Keefe. Every doctored video, we know they're all doctored. That's been proven in court, and every doctored video gets wall-to-wall coverage. Recently, a couple of progressives exposed James O'Keefe, and they had undercover video of O'Keefe and his organization. Barely a peep. It's amazing.
And that even
if
had
you're
him in it.
conservative, the media loves you.
Yeah, but
loves you and can't wait to cover you.
Look,
if you're a liberal, you have to take if you took a 2x4 to their head, they wouldn't cover you.
Unless you had a mask.
You'd have trouble
Unless you had a mask on. Then they'd say you went to Berkeley. So Trump, like CPAC figured out ahead of Trump what works for Trump. I mean, the reason they got the coverage was because these people who, again, as Michael says, they weren't covered the way they ought to be covered, which was look at who is the base of the Republican Party. Look at the things that these guys think. And how out of step is that with what we imagine America is. But the reason they get covered is because they come, Ann Coulter comes and she says outrageous things.
And we don't have that equivalent.
And not only that, there's no, like inside the Democratic Party and liberals, there's differences between like establishment and progressives. And there's actual policy differences. When you go to that, there's people who are a Marco Rubio advisor who will essentially say the same things about foreign policy that any of the most demented people in the Trump administration will say. They just have a better degree and they're less crazy sounding.
You won't,
but the substance
but
really
you don't
is
get
not
that craziness at the Roots conference.
Not
you
at
don't
all.
get it, and
it's not because it doesn't exist.
No, and right, it's because it doesn't exist. Because these are thoughtful people who disagree on
Unless
stuff.
we're gonna like have like Farrakhan on the show and
right,
you know,
and Trump has tapped into that. He's essentially doing what happened. Trump ran a campaign based on the way CPAC has been for the last 10 years.
Support independent media and get the whole Young Turks 2-hour show and other network shows all ad-free. TYTnetwork.com/join. Come join us today.